Well, I do welcome you to this reading of a short account. I'm going to read it in two parts. It's a short account of John Wycliffe, who was known as the father of the English Reformation. And I'm very grateful to Faith Cook for her permission to use this material, which is her written work contained in a book. And the book itself, I'm going to tell you next time in the second part which book it is and how you can obtain a copy. I don't want you to get one step ahead of me then, because I'm going to read the first part today and I want to keep you waiting for the conclusion. It's quite significant actually to include this account at this stage in our country and in the world because of coronavirus, because this account of John Wycliffe takes place during the bubonic plague, the Black Death, which swept across Europe in the 14th century. So this is John Wycliffe, father of the English Reformation, by Faith Cook. John Wycliffe, a young academic studying at Merton College in Oxford, was deeply distressed. Bubonic plague had broken out in Europe in 1346, sweeping through towns and villages, destroying up to 60% of the population. The Black Death. And now in 1348 it had begun its devastating passage through England. Rumours from John's home village, just a few miles from Richmond in Yorkshire, told of numerous victims. Were his parents alive or dead? What about the rest of his family? 2/3 of the population of the West Riding of Yorkshire would be wiped out before this cruel plague had run its fearsome course. Eventually, it would kill 1.5 million people out of England's total population of just 4 million. Few of the living remained to bury the dead. Over 60% of Londoners were perishing. Anxiously, John Wycliffe examined his own armpits, his neck, his groin, for the telltale signs of lumps or angry black spots, the telltale harbinger that spelt near certain death within 3 days. But John did more than just that. Probably born about 1324, young John Wycliffe had shown early signs of academic brilliance and had arrived in Oxford when he was under 16, studying first at Queen's and then at Merton College. Like all young people at that time, he had absorbed from the church the teachings of the papacy, believing that his acceptance with God depended on his good works and his obedience to church dictates. He had listened to services intoned in Latin and seen frescoes on church walls depicting the Last Judgment with vivid flames of hell devouring those who failed to reach the required standards. But now, with death staring him in the face as the bubonic plague spread far and wide, John Wycliffe felt waves of panic sweeping over him. How could he be sure of heaven if he died? He must shut himself away with fasting and prayer and seek the forgiveness of God for his sins. We are told, this visitation of the Almighty sounded like the trumpet of Judgment Day in the heart of Wycliffe. And in those dark days of fear, he mercy sought and mercy found, through believing on the life and death of Jesus Christ on his behalf for his salvation. This understanding that acceptance with God was not by good works, but through Christ, was contradictory to the teaching of the Catholic Church, but it became totally foundational to Wycliffe's subsequent thinking and living. It qualifies him to be called the father of the Reformation, almost 200 years before Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg on the 31st of October 1517. From this time on, Wycliffe began to study the Bible in deadly earnest. For him, it was the authoritative message from God himself. Anything and everything taught by the Church that contradicted the Scriptures must automatically be in error. And this was the message that he began to proclaim fearlessly. The first to feel the onslaught of his brilliant mind were those begging friars, so called. This movement, originated by men like St. Francis of Assisi, had become increasingly corrupt, with its friars travelling around and teaching false doctrines to the people. As Wycliffe himself wrote, "The friar stuffs the people only too effectually with garbage." Under the guise of poverty, they were actually enriching themselves by selling absolutions of sin at apparently cheap prices, but in reality at exorbitant prices, a con the people readily fell for. John Wycliffe went further. Not only were the begging friars cheats and hypocrites, but the papacy itself, with its representative in the person of Pope Urban V, had no rights to claim tribute payment from England and its king, Edward III. This humiliating payment had been set up by King John some 150 years earlier. But now, King and Parliament, taught by the writings and pronouncements of Wycliffe, refused to pay. The papacy threatened to invade England and even excommunicated the king from the church. With the barons threatening to fight back, the arguments continued. At last, King Edward sent 4 delegates, one of whom was John Wycliffe himself. He sent them to Bruges to represent England's cause. With the 2 years of fruitless argument that followed, Wycliffe's attitude to the Pope was hardening. He now spoke of the Pope as Antichrist, the proud worldly priest of Rome. Despite the failure of this mission, Wycliffe's influence was growing, and the king rewarded him by appointing him rector of Lutterworth in Leicestershire. But Wycliffe had also made enemies. We read in John Foxe's Book of Martyrs, "The whole glut of monks and begging friars was set in rage or madness, which did assail this good man on every side." John Wycliffe was now in no doubt about the errors and corruptions of the papacy, but preeminently his guide and beacon was the Bible. If the teachings of the Church contradicted the Scripture, they must be exposed and denounced, and this John Wycliffe did fearlessly and at personal cost. The Pope condemned him as a master of errors and accused him of damnable heresies, ordering his trial and imprisonment in 1377. Well, you'll have to wait till next time to find out what happened to John Wycliffe.